GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Esther and Philip here on GB News.
We've got lots coming up for you this hour. Are men and women treated differently by society and the courts when it comes to sexual assault? We'll be looking at a recent case in which a man was groped at a football game by a woman.
Would you charge your guests for Christmas dinner? Why not? Would they even want to come if you did charge them? Well, we've got a grandmother of 6 who's definitely charging her family this Christmas time.
And later in the show, we'll be speaking to a member of the Scottish Parliament about yesterday's controversial vote on gender recognition. But before all of that, it's time for your latest headlines with the wonderful Rhiannon.
Philip, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 250,000 people hoping to travel by air today are being warned of delays as Border Force staff begin 8 days of strike action. Heathrow, Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports will all be affected. However, Heathrow says it is operating as normal with minimal queuing in immigration halls. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. Professor of Industrial Relations at Wolverhampton University, Roger Seifert, told us the government needs to act fast.
People simply are going to have massive queues coming into the country. And also, even if you bring in non-experts to patrol our borders in that way, they're going to make mistakes. So not only are you going to have long queues, but people who shouldn't be coming in will be allowed in. So it's really a serious matter. And government has got to stop sitting on its hands and get negotiating and increase pay offers. There's no way round all this. It's a disaster for the country.
Well, GBNews understands airlines face millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with likely long delays during the Border Force strike. British Airways is one of a number of airlines instructing its pilots to take on additional fuel. It's to help jets cope with having to hold for an extra hour in the skies during the week-long walkout. A senior aviation source said the contingency plan was essential but extremely costly. Travel expert Sally Gethin told us the extra costs will be passed on to consumers.
Airfares definitely are going to rise over the next year due to lots of issues, the cost of fuel, for example, and airlines cannot bear the brunt of that. They've also had to reduce their schedules in advance to deal with the border control issue, so they're going to lose a lot of money over this.
Meanwhile, motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with friends and family. The AA says today will be the busiest day of the festive period, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. A strike tomorrow by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail is expected to make matters worse. That walkout will last until December the 27th. Charity shops in the UK have experienced their biggest ever sales week as shoppers search for cheaper gifts amid the cost of living crisis. According to the British Heart Foundation, a third of Brits are adjusting their spending limit due to rising bills. Barnardo's, Age UK and Cancer Research UK have also reported a rise in revenue over this festive period. Katie Wilson is the founder of charity Coventry Clothing. She told us the level of need is huge.
Seen a lot more where it's just normal working families where the kid's coat has been lost or the zips broke. One particular guy I saw recently, name was Luke. He came in absolutely really struggling, couldn't afford Christmas. We managed to get him some Christmas gifts as well. But his daughter had recently had an operation and couldn't be in the cold, but he couldn't afford to heat his home. So he was taking extra blankets and things to try and keep her warm.
Scotland's Health Secretary is meeting union leaders later in a bid to avoid NHS strikes. Hamza Yousaf will hold talks after nurses in Scotland rejected the latest pay offer. The Health Secretary is also being urged to get a grip on Scotland's accident and emergency departments. The latest figures show more than a quarter of patients waited longer than the 4-hour target time. And the Princess of Wales has paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth in a special broadcast set to air on Christmas Eve. A warning, the following contains flashing images. Catherine introduces the Royal Carol service held at Westminster Abbey, attended by other members of the royal family, including the King and Queen Consort. It's the first since the Queen died in September.
This year, we've invited hundreds of inspiring individuals to the service. Those who showcase the power of connectedness and community values, allowing us to continue Her Majesty's tradition of recognising and thanking those who have gone above and beyond to support others. Her Majesty leaves with us an incredible legacy and one that has deeply inspired many of us.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thank you, Rhiannon, and we're delighted to be joined in the studio throughout the show by writer and historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop and former Labour MP Simon Danchuk.
And, of course, we want to hear your views today, so get involved in the conversation. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Now, look, before we go on to our first guest, as it were, I saw this front page of the Daily Mail, and it was Jan Moyer who'd written it, and I thought it was a fair point, and I wondered what we thought. Why shouldn't our working-class education secretary wear a £10,000 Rolex? I mean, is this about, it was the cost of living? Is this just because she's a politician? Is this because we're all, you know, jealous as a nation this time of the year? Jan Moyer was asking all kinds of questions, but a gift from a husband, should it matter or should it not, for her 50th birthday, should she be slammed for having a watch?
No, I don't think she should, and I suspect that the attacks on her have come from the far left. They can be particularly vile, certainly on social media, and I suspect that's where she's being attacked from. And what people on the left have to be careful of is looking spiteful, because I think the broader public will really actually be quite happy with her to wear the watch and, you know, and celebrate the fact that she can afford it or that it's a gift from her husband or wherever it's come from. So I think people should be careful in politics in terms of attacking in the way that she's been attacked.
Yeah, but Simon, she does love to court controversy. Am I right? She's the same education secretary that's sort of said very loudly and proudly, oh, you know, teachers are often in the top 10% of earners in certain areas. White privilege doesn't exist. I mean, she's not somebody who shies away from making a stand. And therefore, if other people want to say, look, this is the Secretary of State, she's got a thumping great 10 grand watch, all I would say is this is testimony, surely, to a Conservative minister really believing that Rishi Sunak's government is policing the streets effectively. I would not go around with a 10 grand Rolex watch and waving it above my head and goodness knows what.
But do you think Jan had a point that, you know, people don't like to see people from humble backgrounds sort of doing well? Is this an inverted snobbery in one way or another?
I think that brands, really expensive brands, there's a snobism around them. They're seen as vulgar. You know, the truly posh don't always flaunt their wealth.
Not a Rolex, surely. That's a classical watch.
No,
I think
it's ostentatious. The Rolex watch.
I would have thought it was a classic that lasts forever and ever.
I don't think I'd recognise one, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, you...
I'm not sure I would. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't look at a watch and think, oh, that's a Rolex there. Unless I
and
could
how did anybody know it wasn't a fake?
Exactly. But precisely, and that's about her. She wants us to know, I'm all right, Jack. There's a bit of subliminal messaging going on there. I mean, she is working for a Prime Minister who's richer than a conspiracy theorist.
But doesn't she just want to wear a watch that her husband bought her for her birthday? I mean, what's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong, but she is also preaching to us about how well-paid teachers are in the second breath. I mean, I think politicians have to be aware.
There is a big political issue here, and it relates to Rishi Sunak, and you mentioned that. And I think Labour have been really careful about not attacking Rishi Sunak over his wealth, because the public will frown upon it. If they do that, and some on the far left of the Labour Party, I suspect, will, I think they'll be on to...
So was she politically naive? Was she politically naive wearing this? Or do you think it was like a...
Absolutely. You know, why not? Absolutely.
OK, she's not politically naive, but I don't think she can feign surprise that it's grabbed headlines. And in the end, it'll probably play in her favour, because most of us will think, Sarah, Sarah, if you've got a goddamn watch that costs that much, you may as well wear it until someone pinches it.
Well, instead of, I don't know, maybe in the States you might, you know, admire success and you might admire aspiration, and you might say, slap somebody on the back for doing well. We don't really like that here, and I think that is a problem, because I'd say good for you if you've managed to come, as you say, from Knowsley, I think it is, and here she is, she's doing well, and she's the Secretary of State.
Yeah, we've definitely got a bit of tall poppy syndrome. I often think the reason you got attacked, you were too pretty, too successful, pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, my girl.
Oh,
certainly.
That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
I'm still waiting for her to say something nice about me.
No. You'll be waiting for a bit longer.
Keep waiting, my friend.
Well, OK. Well, anyway, you know, we hear your views on that. I just thought it was an interesting point. Do we not like success? Do we not like people, I don't know, showing off? Is that what it was? But really, it's her watch. It was a birthday.
I think it's summed up by why in America, when I was growing up, Dallas and Dynasty, the richer you were, the bigger you were, and we had Coronation Street in EastEnders. If you compare those two different national barometers, we are uncomfortable with overt wealth.
And I've got another story here, and this is the people who've come over from Ukraine to stay with British families, and they now could end up homeless. They're saying the goodwill, when we brought people over for 6 months, is now running dry. Another big story in the papers.
I'm not surprised at all by that story.
Not at all?
No,
why not?
Well, for a start, people, I think, understandably were horrified by what's going on, but we have very short attention spans. And actually having anyone live in your house, let alone someone who's foreign with different cultural habits in trauma, that is a big deal. Don't underestimate the private space. And 6 months is a very long time, and this war could go on for 6 years.
Exactly. I did think that at the time when you're letting somebody into your house. It wasn't a hotel, it wasn't just supporting people, giving them lifts to and from work or what have you. It was living with them.
By the way, it's not just in Britain. I've got my husband's Romania, I have a lot of contact there. Of course, it's borders Ukraine. And now my friends in Romania are going, well, they come over here, their cars are bigger than ours. I mean, this is one of the big problems that Zelensky's got. Maintaining sympathy.
I mean, Simon, was it? I thought at the time it was a dangerous strategy for the government to go down this route of encouraging people to take them in, because at the end of the day, when people inevitably, as Tessa said, got fed up with it and thought, well, I've done my bit now, it's, you know, I've had enough, it was always going to fall then back on the state to find housing for them. And as we've seen...
that's where it's going to end. And we should celebrate those that have taken these people in more, perhaps, and you know, celebrate the fact and support them in supporting the Ukrainians that they've taken in. So I think government can do more in terms of celebrating those people and encouraging them to carry on doing what they're doing. Hopefully the conflict's going to end relatively soon and people can start going back home, but
and the cost of energy, the cost of fuel, the cost of food.
Perhaps
I think they've increased the amount, hasn't they? From 350 to 500, but even so.
Even if the war ends soon, and I'm not particularly convinced it will, to be honest, but just say it does, it's going to take years to rebuild Ukraine. I mean, what is there to go home to? There might be no housing there might be no... You know, they could be in this country for years and years and years, couldn't they still?
Yeah, absolutely. And the government has to have a strategy towards that.
I know a couple of families have taken in Ukrainian refugees, and money ain't the problem. They've got pots of money, the two families. They happen to be quite well off. They've got excess rooms. I mean, you're pretty rich in London if you've got a couple of spare rooms, aren't you? And but there are issues, put it like that.
I wanted to ask you about the strikes. All the headline in today's papers is about the strikes. Obviously, it seems that the sympathies are waning a bit with the people who work on the railways, but isn't waning for the nurses and the ambulance workers. Do you think as time goes on, sympathy will wane for the NHS workers on strike, or do you think that they will always have public sympathy?
I think it'll wane. I think people are unhappy with how the NHS is operating anyway. I write a column for Business Leader magazine, a weekly political column, and I was saying in that this week that people have to show restraint. You can't just have public sector workers jumping up and down for more money. I think they have to show some restraint, and they're asking for far too much. We've been through a really bad time as a country over the last couple of years, pandemic, Brexit, everything else, economic crisis stage, and people have to come together and show some restraint in 2023. It's the only way we'll get through it.
I actually thought support was even waning for the nurses and the ambulance drivers. I thought people were saying, well, hang on, we don't mind giving you a pay increase. We get that, you need a pay increase. But when junior doctors are wanting 26%, when nurses are hanging out for 19%, the amount was too much. And then they say the average wage for a nurse, 34,000, ambulance drivers with all of the extras, 47k. So people are now investigating a little bit more what's going on.
Can we drill into those stats that you've just thrown out there? You know I love a bit of gender. The ambulance crews are, I think, 50% more male than female. It's predominantly a male occupation. Nurses, 90% of nurses are still women. I find it fascinating, given that they're both on the front line, both equally valuable. I would find it very hard to weigh up the value of one compared to the other.
I think that's a fair point.
But there we have a predominantly female profession paid at least 10 grand less than a paramedic's job. £46,600 was the average salary, granted that often included overtime, of a paramedic last year. I find it once again interesting that the classic male job is remunerated so much better, so I'm fully behind the nurses striking. I'm a bit more ambivalent because I don't think that sounds like such a bad wage. But for the grace of God go I have never walked in a paramedic's shoes.
I wonder if that is about, like, market forces and the numbers of them, because, you know, the number of sort of nurses, doctors, etc. has gone up up on average. I think they said 8% in the last couple of years. We've got more people now per capita looking after people in hospital, but now doing a worse job because there's so many of them. So is there more of them and maybe less of the ambulance drivers? Is that the sort of monetary difference? It can't be because you've just got a driving licence as well, can
that's what I'm thinking. I mean, maybe it's because there's being a paramedic, there's aspects of, care. Maybe people could let us know. Actually, I'd be really fascinated to know what those tangible differences are that means that's so much better enumerated. And incidentally, I think on the striking front, if we're going to actually demand better enumeration, we're going to have to tax more. Because where's the money going to come from?
Well, we want to hear from our viewers as well on any of those stories. Get in touch with us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Coming up, we'll be asking, following on a little bit from what Tess had to say, whether men and women are treated differently when it comes to sexual assault after a female football fan groped a male football fan. Don't go anywhere.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. A wet and windy spell heading northwards through the day today. Most of Scotland will be dry until tonight. Mild again in the south, but chillier air continues further north. The mild but wet and windy spell, courtesy of this set of weather fronts slowly edging in. A soggy start across southwest England and Wales, and that rain drifting north now into the Midlands and southeast England too. A lot of spray, a lot of surface water on the roads, and a lot of traffic on the roads today, of course, as well. So just bear that in mind if you are hitting the roads. That wet spell will spread into northern England and Northern Ireland by lunchtime, and by the end of the day into parts of southern Scotland. A few showers in northern Scotland, some snow in Shetland, but most of Scotland dry but cold. Further south, it does turn a lot drier this afternoon, and it will be mild here as well, but it's also going to be blustery, accompanying this band of rain. Some very gusty winds. Wet and windy weather spreads into southern Scotland this evening. As it hits the colder air, there will be some snow north of the central belt on some of the higher routes this evening, so again, bear that in mind if you are travelling. Further south, it'll be rain showers that we see coming in because the milder air continues to spread northward. Still pretty windy as well through the night. And that leads into a blustery Christmas Eve. There'll be rain showers across northern England and much of Northern Ireland, and outbreaks of rain and hill snow still in parts of northern Scotland. That'll continue through the day, but Shetland may well stay largely dry. For England and Wales, actually for many places, a bright, blustery Christmas Eve with some good spells of sunshine, but showers will come in at times on that gusty wind. Mild temperatures in double figures across the south and even further north. Temperatures a little higher tomorrow compared to today. So it's a mild start to the Christmas period. Christmas Day, mild for most of us with some rain, but turning colder from the northwest during Christmas Day and colder for all of us by Boxing Day.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, it's 10:22. Now, a female football fan who groped a rival male supporter has been spared jail despite the victim calling for the incident to be taken as seriously as an assault by a man.
The Everton supporting victim reported the incident to the police, saying he was shocked and upset. I thought he was just talking about the football result, but no, he was used to that. He was shocked and upset at being fondled by a woman.
So do we treat male victims of sexual assault differently? Here to discuss is Mark Brooks, OBE, the chairman of the Mankind Initiative. Mark, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you saw this case, but it does seem that male and female victims and male and female perpetrators are treated differently, perhaps by society, but certainly by the courts. Is that your experience too?
Yeah, we've certainly seen a trend in that in terms of the last 2 years, where we've seen in the field of domestic abuse and sexual assault, where there's tended to be lower sentences than we would expect for female perpetrators of these types of crimes. And it is obviously a concern that we have, that not only men are not getting the justice that they should get, but also not enough support is being given to the women who are actually carrying out these crimes. And so we need to look at both of those issues, and we feel that the sentences are not being strong enough in terms of when it's a man who's the victim.
So, I mean, I've done lots of research into this, and for every category of offence, a woman is less likely to be sent to prison than a man for committing exactly the same offence, even sexual offences. So, in your view, is this just about not wanting to send women to prison, or is it that sexual assaults against a man are not considered as serious as sexual assaults against a woman?
I think it's both, if I'm being honest. There is a move not to send as many women to prison. I always find it intriguing that the same conversation doesn't happen when it comes to men, given that we've got over 80,000 men in prison right now. But also the whole issue about men who are victims of these crimes not being taken seriously in general. And there was some research a couple of years back with local magistrates who, you know, are one of the key people making these decisions on sentences. And their view was that men could bear more risk and harm than a woman, even in the same situation. That was with respect to domestic abuse. And so there's something about how judges and society in general view that if an incident like this happens to men, the impact and the seriousness is not the same as when it happens to a woman, when of course it should be judged as equally relevant and also taken as equally seriously.
I mean, you know, Mark, I wasn't there, so I don't know how aggressively she groped him and what went on. And I think she sort of was past some crude comments as well. She was going to have him later or whatever. But, you know, people might say, look, man up. Maybe it was a prank that had gone wrong. Even the judge said, look, in drink people can and often do things which are very much out of character. So wasn't there a way that this Everton supporter could have defended himself, told her to do one or what have you? Did she need a custodial sentence?
Well, I think the two things. A, if you reverse the genders, if the assault was by a man on a woman, would that even be part of the conversation? And I don't think it would be, and rightly it shouldn't be. And secondly, it's about the message that you send out, because if you send out a message that it's okay for somebody to accost and sexually assault a man in that way, well, where does that eventually lead? And certainly we've seen cases in kind of Reynard Sinninger, the big case, the rapist in Manchester, where you've got kind of society not really sort of understanding that issues of sexual assault and sexual violence happen to men as well as women. And if we take these types of issues lightly, then inevitably that's where we get to.
Mark Brooks, Chairman of Mankind Initiative, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
And he certainly started a conversation.
Well, Tessa, you were just saying not a short time ago about how we believe in equality and women should be treated the same as men. So should that not apply when it comes to this? And before the courts, should they not treat women and men exactly the same?
Treatment should be equal, but men and women are not equal. A 68-year-old man will have the same muscle strength, probably more, than a 28-year-old woman. And if you have 66% of women saying they don't feel safe on the streets late at night, if you have 43% of women saying they've been groped at some point, and 28% of women saying they've experienced indecent exposure, then I would suggest that the bulk of our concern and the bandwidth that's given to that issue, every time should trump the odd incident where a man feels under threat, undermined, or indeed physically assaulted by a woman.
But surely you can't say, well, just because it doesn't happen that often to men.
I'm not saying
when
that.
When it goes to court, they should be treated differently because it doesn't happen. I mean, it has happened to that man. It was perpetrated by that woman. So surely it's not unreasonable to say that when somebody goes before a court, the man and we believe in equality, that whether it's a male victim or a female victim or a male perpetrator or a female perpetrator, the court should treat that exactly the same. Surely, if you believe in equality, you believe in that.
Yes, I'm now going to go into a deeply personal space and say that if I'm having an argument with my husband and he is going to physically threaten me, that is very different from the prospect of me physically threatening him. So why? Because if he followed through, I would be properly vulnerable.
So the physicality, which is
that
what
is
I did.
a big part of
So I did ask Mark that.
Yeah.
People would say, well, why didn't you deal with it yourself in a way? I mean, I didn't know how vicious the attack was. I didn't. But what I'm saying is there not a way... Simon?
Well, I disagree with Tessa. Tessa was saying that, the odd occasion that this might happen. I suspect there's lots of under-reporting in terms of...
embarrassment?
So men aren't reporting it. I think there'll be a lot of under-reporting. When I was a young guy working in a factory, I was groped by my supervisor, female supervisor. I had to laugh it off. More recently, in the workplace, when I was in Parliament, propositioned by women. And if I were to say the same thing to a woman, I'd be held to high account for it. So I think there are real double standards around this issue, and I think there's a lot of under-reporting. And I think I'm with Phil. I think there needs to be.
I think that's an interesting point. That under-reporting, because what did I say straight away? Man up. Maybe people don't report because they're embarrassed that a woman did come onto them and they were shocked and did nothing.
But what you're talking about there, Simon, which is about the groping, being made to feel uncomfortable, I recognise that, and that needs to be heard. But if we're talking about actually levels of fear, domestic violence, violence towards women on our streets, that is a real and prevalent problem. And I think there's two slightly separate things. If you make me feel uncomfortable, Phil, I have a right to complain. And if I make you feel comfortable, then I believe there's HR and you can report me later. That I agree. That should be what's the word?
Equitable.
Equitable, thank you very much. It's 2 days before Christmas. But we can't strip away the fact that this problem predominantly lies with men against women.
Right. Again, get involved with our conversation. Coming up, we'll be joined by a representative from the supermarket, Esther, to see what they're doing to help British veterans this Christmas, because British veterans in the army are doing a lot for us over this Christmas. But that's after the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Good morning, it's 10:31. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 250,000 people hoping to travel by air today are being warned of delays as Border Force staff begin 8 days of strike action. Heathrow, Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports will all be affected. However, Heathrow says it is operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. Professor of Industrial Relations at Wolverhampton University, Roger Seifert, told us the government needs to act fast.
People simply are going to have massive queues coming into the country. And also, even if you bring in non-experts to patrol our borders in that way, they're going to make mistakes. So not only are you going to have long queues, but people who shouldn't be coming in will be allowed in. So it's really a serious matter. And government has got to stop sitting on its hands and get negotiating and increase pay offers. There's no way around all this. It's a disaster for the country.
GB News understands airlines face millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with likely long delays during the Border Force strike. British Airways is one of a number of airlines instructing its pilots to take on additional fuel. It's to help jets cope with having to hold for an extra hour in the skies during the week-long walkout. A senior aviation source says the contingency plan was essential but extremely costly. Motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the roads to spend Christmas with friends and family. The AA says today will be the busiest day of the festive period, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. A strike tomorrow by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail is expected to make matters worse. The walkout will last until December the 27th. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2058 and €1.1363. The price of gold is £1,491.47 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,488 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News.
Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236, and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Esther, what have you got?
Gary here said, look, men and women are different. They should be treated differently. For men, the only really problem comes overly excessive, as men are not as emotionally tied to sexual proclivity as women. So he's got a point there. Then he said the other difference is a man getting unwanted attention from another man could be emotionally damaging. So notwithstanding this, you know, the serious, I don't know, effect and impact it has on the individual. But interesting points raised there.
Lots of views about the strikes. David says, speaking of strikes, as a postman of over 15 years, I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that our ballot far outweighed that of any NHS or RMT ballot. Over 97% yes vote on a 77% turnout. Why are we striking? We want to save the service and the jobs that Royal Mail are trying to destroy.
Well, George, the government is absolutely right to hold firm right now. The pay review body has independently assessed what that amount should be. It's time for the government to get tough. Fair is over. It's time to move towards legislation to enforce the independently assessed resolutions and to ban strike action of the essential public services. We cannot be held to ransom, and we will be weak on other things.
There's a couple of interesting ones on the debate about ambulance drivers and paramedics. Jeff says, just to make you aware, an emergency ambulance is most often crewed with one paramedic and one emergency care assistant. Emergency care respondents are paid far less than paramedics. In fact, I believe it's not far off half. Non-emergency ambulance drivers earn approximately £19,000 a year. The ambulance service is made up with a number of different jobs, and only paramedics earn anywhere near the figures you are quoting. I know this as I work for South Central Ambulance Services for 3 years.
Thanks for that. Very good point.
Nuffield Trust, 39,000 is the average across the board of an ambulance crew member. That's the middle.
But I think that probably answers some of the questions between the male and the female differences. It's actually the sort of
Patrick
grading.
also says, in answer to your point about the difference in salaries between nurses and ambulance paramedics, I think this was directed at you, Tessa, you need to remember that paramedics, similar to doctors, are frequently required to give life-saving treatment, often in dangerous circumstances.
So they've got an extra dimension. Well, I tell you, we don't half learn a lot from our viewers. You know that. Anyway,
absolutely.
supermarket giant Asda have reaffirmed their support for the UK's military personnel by again signing the Armed Forces Covenant.
Asda's General Counsel Helen Selby said that the company was proud to continue their support for the armed forces, and she's here now to tell us more. Helen, thank you for joining us. So, what is it precisely that Asda are doing for veterans and the armed forces?
Good morning. So our promise under the military covenant, which we signed in 2014 and we signed again last month, is we will offer to interview every leaving veteran and service personnel provided they meet the minimum standards for the role that they're applying for. So that's the first thing we do. We guarantee leave to all reservists in our business for the training that they need to go and do as a reservist. We also support employment opportunities for the service spouses and partners as well. That's really, really important. And we assist our veterans through the transition away from the military and into our business, because it is a bit, for a lot of them, it is a big transition. And finally, we are supportive of the charity called Veterans into Logistics, and we donated over £40,000 to that charity, which again helps train up ex-service men and women who want a career afterwards in logistics.
And so why did you decide to do this? Why is this so important to ASDA?
So we absolutely acknowledge the unique skills that service personnel have to bring and have to contribute, and how important they are to our business, and we want to be supportive of that. I'm also personally supportive because I'm an ex-veteran. I served in the Royal Air Force a number of years ago, and service personnel, they're used to a complex business, that they operate at their best in a complex business, and ASDA is a complex business, and we have a myriad of roles which fits very, very well. So we take them. They've got the skills that we need. They've got the leadership skills. That they've got the team skills. They are motivated. They've got a can-do attitude, and then we train them in retail. And so
you can't disagree. You can't disagree with that. They're now saving the country during this period of strikes. They're going in there. They're dutiful. They're honour bound. They're there. They're reliable. So I think there's a whole host of reasons why I'd want one as a member of staff.
Yeah. No, Helen, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for what ASDA are doing. I think it's a really fantastic initiative, and I think I'm right in saying that I think ASDA's taken over 1,000 veterans into their stores this year. So, Helen, thank you very much.
Yes, that's right.
We salute what you're doing, and I think that's a really heartwarming story, isn't it, about what the supermarkets are doing?
Yeah, I think what do people look for now? I always say it's attitude, it's dependability, it's, I don't know, initiative, team play, all of these things that are often overlooked.
There is quite a correlation between people who've worked in the services who become paramedics, incidentally, on that frontline adrenalised role. I would say sometimes veering more towards men than women, and therefore better remunerated.
I think it's great that we celebrate the military and everything that they do, especially at this time of year. They can't go on strike. You know, in the hierarchy of roles, they're really at the top, aren't they? They make a fantastic contribution.
Yeah, so they're covering for people who are on strike who are earning more than they are, and they're covering for them.
But then legally they're not allowed to strike.
No,
they're
Her
Majesty's force.
Doesn't make it right, does it?
Well, but making that now true for everyone. They all won't be able to strike. That's the way forward,
It
isn't
won't
it?
surprise
Nobody
you to
can
hear,
strike.
Esther, that I don't approve of that.
No, I don't either.
Now, Christmas dinner is one of the happiest meals of the year, shared by all the family. But this year, with households feeling the pinch, one Cardiff grandmother called Caroline Doddridge is leading the way with her savvy idea of charging guests for their place at her table. Apparently, even her 3-year-old grandchildren are coughing up to attend.
We're delighted to say that Caroline joins us now. So, Caroline, I want to figure out, what is the cost? What you're charging people? Is there any differences in cost? And how did you work out the cost to attend?
There is a difference. There's a hierarchy of cost, and I worked it out. Before I tell you that, I worked it out by pricing up everything that I need to get for the Christmas dinner. Plus, I do a buffet Christmas Eve and a buffet on Boxing Day. So I price it. I write down everything costs, and then I sort of work out what contribution they can make that helps. I don't want to make a profit. I don't want to take their money.
That's good to hear that Gran isn't making a profit out of her grandchildren. But the blokes are paying more than your sons are paying more than your daughters. Is that because they're washing the dishes and doing some other help?
Well, no, it's because they work full time. So they work full time and they haven't got families, which I know some people think, well, that's not fair, but it's only a fraction more. So the boys pay £15 with my son-in-law, and then the girls £10 because they only work part time. The older grandchildren pay £5, and then the two babies, I call them babies, pay £2.50. Because they don't really eat that much.
Philip was saying you need to put your prices up.
I think you might be undercharging here, Caroline. I think you might need to be putting your prices up.
That's what I think. I think next year it's going to be a budget. I'm going to do a budget, and I say the prices are going up.
Charge for her time, because so often it's the invisible work women do. You could be doing extra time, extra hours over Christmas, whereas you're choosing instead to stay at home and organise the buffet and cook the turkey. So you should be charging, what, it's about 10 quid, 12 quid an hour, do you reckon?
So again, you're with Philip. She needs to put the prices up, Simon.
I wanted to ask about levels of service and who the waiting staff are, and what if you've got a complaint?
Caroline.
You get your money back.
Can you write a complaint to you? Can you get your money back if you say, look, this pig in blanket isn't cooked very well? I mean, I say Simon was straight on there with the complaints.
No refunds, no.
Caroline, has anybody said, well, I'm not coming in that case? If you're going to charge me, I'm not paying to come to... Has it put anyone off coming?
I'd say, fine. See if you can do it cheaper yourself. I'm probably sure I wouldn't say it like that. But, you know, at the end of the day, I tell them how much it all costs and that they see they only pay a tiny proportion of that.
Yeah.
And, you know... so far, they've accepted it.
Yeah. Can I say I said to you, hey, Gran, I haven't got £2.50 or a £5 or what have you, but can I don't know, sing for my supper? Can I do something else in lieu of paying? Would you accept that or not?
I don't know, because that's not happened. I could do credit terms, or could I?
Yes. Pay £1 a week for the next 3 weeks or something.
I'll tell you what, Caroline, you wouldn't want Esther sing...
interest on top of that?
You wouldn't want Esther singing for a supper, I can tell you that for nothing. You'd want to charge her more if she offered to start singing, to be perfectly frank.
Caroline's chosen a really good year to do this, by the way, because the average cost, just for a frozen turkey and a Christmas pudding, a couple of veg, for 4 people, it's gone from £24.67 last year to £31 this year.
You want to be putting your prices up, Caroline. This is my point. I think I'm full of admiration for what you're doing. Yeah. I think there's no such thing as a free dinner. There's no such thing as a free dinner, and I think you're making that point, and I think it's to be celebrated.
And you know what else I think, Caroline? I bet you there's a lot of people who've thought, I wish I could share the load in a way. I wish I could have asked people to chip in, but instead I'm doing this monumental task by myself and nobody's paying. And I think you've allowed a lot of people to do the same thing. I'll be doing it on Sunday.
Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you get all the money in.
Having me.
I hope you get all the money in, and have a wonderful Christmas day. Thank you very much for joining us.
She's already got the money in. There's a cut-off date. I think it's either the end of November or 1st of December. Oh, she's got the money in.
Oh, she's already got the money.
No admittance.
Right. But we all like his grandmother's cooking. I loved my grandmother's cooking. You know, so I would pay.
I thought she was going to say she charges the men more because they eat more. I thought that's what she was going to say. But...
I'm still fascinated that she doesn't charge for her time. I think it's incredibly generous. It's a great offer. Also the cost of the oven, heating the oven, cleaning afterwards.
If Caroline hasn't gone, is there any more spaces? There's 4 of us. There's 4 of us here in our family.
That is a good point. If anybody wants to join, exactly. I think she could do a roaring trade at those prices. Where can you go on Christmas Day for dinner for 15 quid?
Well, you can't. But the thing is, she's a free waitress, isn't she, and a free cook?
Absolutely. Now, the traditional 17th century Christmas carol, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, has been rewritten to be more inclusive, sparking outrage from some Christians.
Some of the new lyrics read, God rest you, queer and questioning. Your anxious hearts be still. Believe that you are deeply known and part of God's goodwill.
Is the Church of England too focused on political ideology? Here to discuss this is former chaplain to the late Queen, Dr. Gavin Ashenden. So, lots of people will be going crazy crackers that you're changing the words, or I should say the Church of England's changing the words to these Christmas carols.
Well, yes, it was the Methodist Church in America that did it. In fact, It's terribly well intentioned. It's meant to be reaching out to people they feel need some affirmation and some help, but it's a great mistake. It's really shooting ourselves in the foot. The carol in particular that we're quoting is a very moving one. It's full of some very good Christian imagery, which they threw out to put in some woke stuff. The trouble is the woke stuff doesn't work to get people closer to God. It might help people feel more integrated in society, but then we're doing, it's the state's role to do that by its own laws. What carol should be doing is celebrating an experience of God and the promise that Christ brings to all people if they want him.
I mean, I thought this was a joke when I first heard it, I'll be perfectly honest, but it is true. I mean, it brings about a wider point, though, isn't it? That I know you say that this sort of started in the Methodist Church in America. I know at least one church in the UK has already gone down this route. But why is the Church of England so sort of obsessed with political correctness and being woke? It seems as if it's become an obsession with the Church of England.
Well, I think it has. I mean, I've been honestly thinking about this for really quite a long time, and I've got a rather simple idea. I hope it's not simplistic, but the whole point about being a Christian is that through prayer and the Holy Spirit, you get put in touch with God. It's a rather wonderful thing. Pentecostals are excellent at making a great song and dance about it. But if you lose this sense of personal connection, then one of the ways you can make up for it, as a kind of compensation, is to try and make yourself more socially relevant instead of spiritually alive. And I'm afraid I think that the evidence is that people in the Church of England become less spiritually alive, because if you're spiritually alive, you don't need this stuff. It all works very well. It's only if somehow the impact of a real relationship with God gets diminished that you then look for another kind of handle to stabilize yourself and make yourself feel relevant. And I'm afraid I think that's what they're doing.
Now, I believe the LGBT activists within the church said the lyrics here speak to the pain that the church has caused so many different groups. Do you have any sympathy with that? That's sort of pushing the boundary because of past pains.
Well, I do. I mean, you may not know, but I was an LGBT activist myself for a while. I felt very strongly. I understand where they're coming from. But the thing is, Christianity has a different way of looking at people. We don't think God looks at us and categorizes us according to the way our genitals work. He doesn't treat us in that way. And Christians also don't look at each other as if we're defined by our amorous or erotic attractions. There's a lot of other ways of categorizing people, cleverness, kindness, generosity, all sorts of things. But we've become fixated on sex in our society. And I think it's really important that the church doesn't follow society down that road and become fixated by sex, and only see people as valuable or put them in categories according to their sexual desires. We're above that. We should be doing something very different. So I understand that people have. Sorry, go on.
Stay there, Gavin. I want to bring in Tessa. Tessa, what do you think about the Church of England going all woke and politically correct?
I think the Church of England recognises, and I wonder what Gavin thinks about this. There is a crisis where if the average age of the churchgoer going to the establishment Church of England is 61, where does your future lie? And I agree, this tinkering at the edges, fiddling with a hymn or two ain't going to work. But at some point, we have to address the dwindling congregation sizes and their very old age.
Is this going to make younger people pour into church?
Well, no, it's not. But I think that's one of the reasons it's being done, is because there is this existential crisis going on within the established church. Would you agree, Gavin?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, the national statistics suggest that about 1.8% of people in a population are gay. So we're not going to suddenly double the numbers by doing that. But you're quite right. It's about an existential crisis. The fact is, this isn't just the poor Church of England's problem. The Christianity in the West has had a really hard hammering for about 100 years now. It's flourishing in China, in Russia, in Africa, in Asia, all over the world. There are people becoming new Christians in huge numbers. But in Europe and America, our secular society has really given Christianity a hammering in a way that it's given no other worldview a hammering. So we've been pruned right down. But the answer is not to give way and to accept the criteria of different philosophies. It's to be more authentically Christian ourselves.
Dr. Gavin Ashenden, thank you very much.
Simon.
Oh, Simon.
I was just going to make the point. I enjoy.
Hang on there, Gavin.
I enjoy singing a traditional carol. It's one of the highlights of being in church, in actual fact. And the simple solution, surely, is for people to write modern carols that address these issues and see if anybody wants to sing them. And if they don't, stick to the traditional one.
Yeah, I mean, Gavin, I agree with Simon. I find the traditions and rituals rather reassuring when I go to church. I think that when you start messing about with everything, and it's like this modernisation of the Lord's Prayer. You go into church now, you've no idea what version of even the Lord's Prayer you're going to be reading out. I find it loses its appeal when you mess about with these things. It doesn't make me more want to go more. It makes me want to go less, to be honest.
I'm afraid I completely agree with you. I think we have to be very up to date with the ways we communicate what we believe, but what we believe mustn't change. Otherwise, what is it? It's simply a fashion. So I hope the Church of England can become more confident about what it believes and more imaginative about the way it communicates it.
Dr. Gavin Ashenden, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We really appreciate that. I just want to say, you made the interesting point that the average age that people go to church is 61. People say very similar things about the average age of Conservative Party members. It might be that probably even higher, to be honest, the age of that. People might say, well, you know, there's no young people buying Ferrari cars, so where's the future for Ferrari if no young people are buying them? I mean, the argument presumably is that when younger people get to 60 or whatever, that's when they've got the time and the inclination to go to church. It's not that the future's no good, it just means that people are just going there later in life.
Yeah, except we've seen incrementally the average age of the churchgoer rise. So, for example, in my childhood, I went every Christmas morning, I went to church. I invariably went to Sunday school. I don't really know why, because my dad would come back and go, you peeing in the cook, you haven't cooked dinner. You know, it was just what you did. Whereas my daughter, the idea of getting her to church on Christmas Day, that would be a sort of domestic war.
But some of it, I do think, is that because a laziness has crept in. People don't want to be up and out and doing that of a Sunday. It's a long time for reflection, which maybe people aren't doing, and now they'd sooner do something quick and instant on TikTok. And there is the rise of the online spiritual gurus.
Yeah, I agree with you. And some churches are quite good at that. I attend a church that has an online presence, a very strong online presence. You can do it. You can attend the church remotely as opposed to going there, and I think that works for people.
No,
as well.
I can't.
Oh, the remote's got everybody going.
I can't back that.
We'll carry on this dust-up ourselves, but that's it for the first hour. But don't go anywhere, because coming up, we'll be looking at the controversial vote in Scotland on gender recognition.
And following up on the story this week that 2/5 of teachers are washing the clothes of their students and feeding them. What's that all about? We'll be speaking to a headmaster in Bradford to see if this really is going on. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Why are 2/5 of teachers washing their students' clothes?
Are they?
We'll be speaking to a headmaster from one of the poorest areas in Bradford to see if that is true.
And if it is too expensive this year, we've got a thrifty mum coming on. We've had a thrifty grandma in the last hour, now we've got a thrifty mum who this year will only be buying second-hand presents for her family.
And we'll be talking to a member of the Scottish Parliament about yesterday's controversial gender recognition bill.
And Deborah, we want to hear from you this morning. So if you want to get involved with the show, email us at gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. But before we get going with the next hour, here's the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes past 11, your top stories from the GB newsroom, and we start with some breaking news just in. Nurses in England will strike again on January the 18th and 19th. The Royal College of Nursing's just announced that's unless negotiations are opened. It's in an escalation of the ongoing pay dispute with the government, and we'll bring you more on that as we get it. The Prime Minister's apologised for travel delays over Christmas as strike action by Border Force staff disrupts the plans of those hoping to travel by air today. Heathrow, Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports will all be affected. However, Heathrow says it is operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. Rishi Sunak says public sector pay must be controlled to keep down inflation.
First of all, I'm really sad and I'm disappointed about the disruption that is being caused to so many people's lives, particularly at Christmas time. What I'm trying to do is make the right long-term decisions for the country, for everybody's benefit. And I think we all know that the major economic challenge we all face now is inflation. It's inflation that's eating into everyone's pay packets, it's rising the cost of living, and I want to make sure that we reduce inflation. Part of that is being responsible when it comes to setting public sector pay.
Well, GB News understands airlines face millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with likely long delays during the Border Force strike. British Airways is one of a number of airlines instructing its pilots to take on additional fuel. It's to help jets cope with having to hold for an extra hour in the skies during the week-long walkout. A senior aviation source said the contingency plan was essential but extremely costly. Travel expert Sally Gethin told us the extra costs will be passed on to consumers.
Airfares definitely are going to rise over the next year due to lots of issues, the cost of fuel, for example, and airlines cannot bear the brunt of that. They've also had to reduce their schedules in advance to deal with the border control issue, so they're going to lose a lot of money over this.
Scotland's Health Secretary is meeting union leaders later in a bid to avoid NHS strikes. Hamza Yousaf will hold talks after nurses in Scotland rejected the latest pay offer. The Health Secretary is also being urged to get a grip on Scotland's accident and emergency departments. The latest figures show more than a quarter of patients waited longer than the 4-hour target time. The UK government may block Scotland's new law, which makes it easier for people to change gender. Holyrood's warned any attempt to do so will be vigorously contested. MSPs voted to pass the Gender Recognition Reform Bill yesterday. It'll remove the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria to obtain a gender recognition certificate. Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack is now able to legally challenge the law if he believes it impacts on the UK. Motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with friends and family. The AA says today will be the busiest day of the festive period, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. A strike tomorrow by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail is expected to make matters worse. The walkout will last until December the 27th. The Princess of Wales has paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth in a special broadcast set to air on Christmas Eve. A warning for those of you watching on television: the following contains flashing images. Catherine introduces the Royal Carol service held at Westminster Abbey, attended by other members of the royal family, including the King and Queen Consort. It's the first since the Queen died in September.
This year, we've invited hundreds of inspiring individuals to the service. Those who showcase the power of connectedness and community values, allowing us to continue Her Majesty's tradition of recognising and thanking those who have gone above and beyond to support others. Her Majesty leaves with us an incredible legacy, and one that has deeply inspired many of us.
And George Cohen, part of England's 1966 World Cup winning team, has died aged 83. Cohen played every minute of the victorious campaign on home soil and in total won 37 caps for his country. His former club, Fulham, announced his death this morning. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Esther and Philip.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Lots of you have been getting in touch, and I'm going to start with this one, and it's Brian. And he says this: Esther, I think you're brilliant and I love your show, right? And I'm not just saying it because of that, because it's the next bit that counts, he says. But to call us ambulance drivers is very insulting. We work in highly stressful situations and do more than drive an ambulance. We administer a variety of drugs independently, which, again, only doctors prescribe. Plus the fact we are making independent decisions out with the hospital settings and also working in potentially dangerous situations. So, Brian, I hope you still love the show and think I'm brilliant, and I apologise because I do understand you do a lot of really important life-saving stuff.
We've had lots and lots of views about how we treat men and women for groping. William says, I suspect that many men have been touched by women and not said much in response, which was a point that Simon made earlier. I know I have, from being pestered by schoolgirls when I was a student to my bottom being smacked by a secretary when I bent over a desk, and being groped by a young woman while I was waiting to alight a train at Shipley Station.
Oh?
It didn't particularly bother me, but I recognise that the impact on women is very different. Indeed, William, that's the station in my constituency. So,
well, I've got Nick here. Nick says, men need to get a grip, for God's sake. I get groped by tipsy, middle-aged women every time I wear my kilt.
Which is probably why he's wearing it so often. Val says, the fact that it's usually men assaulting women has no relevance to an individual case, as women were always complaining about the low conviction rate when it comes to sexual assaults. We can't have it both ways by expecting men to be convicted, but not women. Fair point, Val, I think.
OK, passengers in England are facing the largest increase in rail fares in over a decade. Starting from next March, there will be a 5.9% increase in fares.
Labour have called the proposals a sick joke, and a watchdog has said passengers are not getting value for money.
To discuss the story further, we're now joined by Bruce Williamson, the National Press Officer for Rail Future. But was a rise not inevitable?
Oh, yeah, it's very much expected. And normally, of course, we have increases that are based on the RPI inflation figure, which would have meant this year, something like 11-12% increase. So, clearly that's politically unacceptable. So it's very welcome in the sense that for the first time in, I think, 25 years, we've got a rail fare increase which is less than inflation. But, we want that to happen more and more. It's about time we had a whole series of inflation minus rail fare increases. Also worth noting, of course, that people's income has not gone up by 5.9%, so on average. So for many rail passengers, this is a real terms increase, meaning that rail travel is taking a greater chunk out of their income yet again.
The biggest problem, Bruce, is that for many people who have been travelling by rail, it's been an absolute disaster. Half the trains haven't been running, at least, probably more than half the trains haven't been running. The service has been absolutely abysmal. I suppose most rail passengers would probably say, well, look, I don't mind paying extra if I'm getting a really good service, but to be paying 6% more when the trains have been an absolute disaster is a real kick in the teeth.
I've got some tweets here, and they've all been saying it should be decreased, not increased. Timetables constantly broken. People are, we're being delayed. We're not getting a good service. The list is endless of complaints.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. It's not just rail strikes. Of course, rail strikes are a major factor. That's caused big disruption. But the performance of the train operating companies has been abysmal. We've all heard about it. Northern and what's the other? Is it Avanti? Are just not doing very well, and trains delayed, cancelled, services reduced, overcrowding, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean it's understandable that passengers would say, we're just not getting value for money here, and that's another reason why we should be having inflation minus rail fare increases.
Bruce, what's your view on the strikes? Do you have sympathy for the people who are working on the railways going out on strike, or do you think that they are, in effect, by going out on strike, destroying their own industry and that it will be counterproductive?
Well, both of those things are true. Obviously we want a resolution to that because it's in no one's best interest. I mean, I think it is, damaging the credibility of the railway as a mode of transport, as something attractive that we want passengers to use. But similarly, I have sympathy with workers who are being offered something that is considerably lower than inflation. And not only that, we must remember that this whole dispute is not just about pay. There are changes to working practices which the train operating companies are trying to impose as well, and they will make life harder for train drivers. So yeah, in that respect, I have some sympathy with them.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. But this train situation, it's a mess.
I read here, Simon, that in 2019, season ticket sales between July and September were £556 million. This year, in the same period, £164 million. I mean, where do people working on the railways think the money's going to come from for these pay rises?
Well, and people are now talking about broken Britain, because of the NHS, the strike action, immigration issues. But I think rail is a really big part of that. People's experience of the rail network nowadays is atrocious. The service itself is just atrocious. I'm a regular on the West Coast Main Line, and it's an absolutely awful service. It was so much better under Virgin, there's no doubt about that. And so this is adding insult to injury to be charging even more, putting the price up when the service is getting worse. And so the feeling amongst the public, I think, is of real concern. And from a government perspective, I think this is really harming them. I think they have to get on top of the quality of rail services.
But like you said, it's all now filling into a collapse of the system, isn't it? So the closing, you're not selling tickets, nobody is using it, less people have used it since COVID and lockdown. It is a problem.
Which companies give a pay rise when they're losing 70% of their income?
Well, it is extraordinary. I've got to say that I think it's one of the cases where privatisation didn't work. So my mum lives in Scotland, and I have to use the LNER line. There is no other option. You know, if I want to get up to Pitlochry in a day, that's how long it takes, by the way, literally. So how can that work? Privatisation is about options, but we don't have options. We have to use the train service that gets us from RA to RB, and it doesn't work. And actually, we've been very poorly served. And this time of year, when we are literally shunting our most precious pensioners across the country to be with us, my mum rang me in a panic 2 nights ago at 11 p.m. from the Highlands of Scotland. I've just had an email saying my train's cancelled for tomorrow. You know, she was actually properly vulnerable, over 80. Sure enough, she arrives in London an hour and a half late and 2 days earlier than I wanted her because of the goddamn strikes.
I thought she was ringing up in a panic because she thought you might be charging her for a Christmas dinner, mate.
Well, do you know what? At the moment, she's having to cook her own Christmas dinner because I'm sitting here with you and she's sitting in my house in London.
But anyway, we all remember Christmas is a time for giving. But it can be costly for all of us buying presents for family and friends.
Amid the cost of living crisis, one mum has spoken out against this and is refusing to buy anything new for her family or friends this Christmas.
Well, we're delighted to say that she joins us now. So fantastic to have you with us there, Heidi. So come on, how did this come about? Why did you decide I'm not forking out this Christmas?
Well, I decided at the beginning of 2022 not to buy any new clothes for myself and to try and buy secondhand wherever I could. So I thought I may as well extend it to Christmas gifts as well, because the quality of the things that you can find in charity shops, car boot sales, flea markets, craft sales, there's some fabulous bargains out there. So why would you buy new?
How much did you used to spend on Christmas, say last year or the year before?
So before the cost of living, obviously, budget wasn't as so much of a constraint, and I would easily spend £300, £400, £500 each on my children, and then there was gifts for the family. So it would be quite extravagant, and I'm embarrassed to say I would go into debt for Christmas presents as well in the past.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. Many people do that, and they sort of pay for it for the whole year. What are you planning to spend this Christmas time?
£100 each on the children, so they've had to think really long and hard about what it is that they really, really want. And I think what's different now is, I grew up in the 1970s and you got new clothes only at Christmas and at birthdays. Now kids get throughout the year, so actually they really struggle to think of things that they really needed, not just that they wanted, that they might need. So they're quite happy with the budget, and we've talked about it since sort of September, and I've got them used to the idea, so they've had to think about what they really want. I've taken my daughter thrifting with me, so she sees the quality of the things that you can get in charity shops and at car boot sales, so she knows that you can get some fabulous things.
What's she asking for? What she decided? She's had since September to think. She's had a budget. What's she going for?
Well, she's a 13-year-old girl, so it's around smellies, it's around makeup, cosmetics, all of those sort of pampery gifts. And the amount of stuff that I've found, and I have been collecting it up over a little while, but the things that I found at car boot sales, brand new gifts that are still sealed, in date, absolutely mint condition and high-end brands. So we're talking things like Molten Brown smellies that I found for pennies at car boot sales. There's amazing things. If you've got a good eye for it and you've got the patience to look, you can really save yourself a fortune.
Heidi, do you get the impression from speaking to your friends and family that actually lots more people are doing what you're doing this year, or do you think you're sort of out on a limb?
No, I shared my story on TikTok and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to get trolled. But actually, most of the comments were, I was terrified people were going to call me stingy, and most people came back and said, do you know what, we spend too much at Christmas. It's about greed. We've lost all concept of what it's about being together, sharing time with your family. There were a few comments from parents that said, I would work 3 jobs to get my kids exactly what they wanted under the tree. And I thought, well, no kid ever wants a mom to be frazzled and catatonic on Christmas Day because they've worked 3 jobs just to buy stuff. And actually, the things that children remember and your family and friends remember are the time that you've spent together. It's not the gift that you gave. If you think back to your own childhood, what you remember is the fun things that you did at Christmas, the people that you saw. You never remember the gifts.
Heidi on rack, thank you very much indeed. I think you've been a breath of fresh air. I'm with. I'm hearing all kinds of ums and agreements from
lots of people will be relieved, won't they, to hear that? Because, I mean, in fact, my mum and dad have said, look, don't bother with Christmas presents this year. I think when times are tough, it makes sense. And also, people end up buying things not necessarily that people want or need, just for the sake of buying
I disagree with
the
you.
The pressure to buy tat, that's the problem. And I've my 12 and 14-year-old...
to buy what?
Tat.
Oh,
you know, to just buy rubbish.
Rubbish, yeah.
And what I've bought, I don't know if they're watching this, my 12 and 14-year-old, I've bought them luggage this year. I bought them a really good case, and I think...
Where are they going? No, you can't get it.
I'm taking them on holiday, yeah. But I think that's a good, useful present that'll stay with him for a long time.
Tessa,
It's a sign you want them to shimmy on out of the house almost too soon. I've got to say, I have a few issues. My brother, who bizarrely is a consultant for charities and still yet manages to earn considerably more than me, last year...
That's another talking point. We'll come back to that.
Last year, wrapped up some of his older children's stuff and gifted it to my youngest daughter. And it's a sibling thing. But I was like, look, mate, do you know, I'm happy to receive all your second-hand goodies, but I don't want them masquerading as presents under my tree. So I'll take your second-hand stuff, but I also want to know you've gone out and chosen something, the time spent. So I thought your guest had a really good point. She's clearly gone and sourced. She's done that time, which is where the real giving lies. But I also want to know from my sibling there's a transaction that's cost him money and is coming to me.
Yeah. Well, he heard it here. Don't be putting any tat under that Christmas tree. Tessa's wanting a decent present this year. Coming up, we'll be looking at a controversial bill on gender recognition that was passed yesterday in Scotland. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's almost 11:25. We've got some of your views here. Michael, how outrageous rail fares are going to increase while rail unions are shipwrecking the service.
Madeline says traditional dinners were a thing of the past. Hours preparing it, minutes eating it, hours clearing up, Christmas Day over. Better to have a buffet with guests bring their Christmas delights. More precious time with friends and family.
And Peter, this gender ruling in Scotland, which we're just about to come on to, is a degenerate and dangerous ruling and should be outlawed.
And Rona says inflation is not relevant in percentage terms. If utilities, petrol and basic foods have gone up by £300 a month, that's 40% plus for some and negligible for others, and pay rises should be considered accordingly.
Thank you very much. Now, the Scottish Government, getting back here to what Peter said, the Scottish Government has hailed yesterday as a historic day after passing the controversial gender recognition bill allowing transgender people to self-identify their legal sex from the age of 16.
The legislation passed angered Scottish Tories and feminist campaigners who believe the law will put women at risk. Here to discuss further is LGBT campaigner Peter Tatchell and Rachel Hamilton, member of the Scottish Parliament for the Scottish Conservatives. Peter, if I can start with you here. What's your view on the law yesterday? Do you accept that in some circumstances it will impact on women's safe spaces and could put them at risk?
Well, as the Scottish Government has made it clear, this legislation does not override the principles of the Equality Act, which do allow for certain single-sex spaces. Moreover, we do have the situation where a number of women's groups have supported the legislation, and the legislation has also been backed by the UN expert on sexual orientation and gender identity. So I can understand why people want to feel concerned about women's rights, but I don't believe those fears are founded. I don't believe they're well founded. I believe that there are the protections that women need and deserve.
Amendment put down which would have stopped sex offenders being allowed to self-identify, so a male sex offender being able to self-identify as a woman, and people who had been convicted of rape or charged with rape from being able to self-identify as a woman. Would they not have just been, whatever your view on the bill as a whole, would they not have been very sensible safeguards to introduce into the legislation?
Well, the legislation does require that those people be very carefully and thoroughly vetted. Of course, we should always hold out the hope for people changing, for people recognizing they did something wrong, experiencing the appropriate punishment, but also we give the hope of redemption. So, of course, women must be protected. We mustn't allow people who are a risk to women to go into prisons. We mustn't allow the prison system to put women in a position of vulnerability. But this legislation is saying that those people, where they have a history of either physical or sexual violence against women, they will have to be thoroughly investigated to see if they still pose a risk. So maybe, for example, someone 20 or 30 years ago did something terrible against a woman. They were punished, but now they've transformed. Maybe now they've recognized their mistake. They've turned over a new leaf. In those circumstances, they should be given a second chance.
Rachel Hamilton, where did the drive for this new legislation come from? And why was it done, which seemed very quickly, and done before Christmas?
Well, in fact, this legislation has been...
Rachel, hang on.
Yeah, the drive came from a manifesto commitment from Nicola Sturgeon's SNP, and it's taken 6 years to get to this point. Unfortunately, the debate has been not scrutinised properly, and we've seen the key safeguards removed and a self-ID system put in place to allow young people as young as 16 to change their gender legally. I believe that it was rushed. We looked at 150 amendments over a 2-day period and worked well into the early hours of the morning on both of those days, just 3 days before Christmas. We heard key evidence from you, the UN expert Reem Al-Salam on Monday just. And I think it's unfortunate that we've not been able to scrutinise this legislation properly and look at the protections that could be afforded to women and girls.
Now, explain what, some of the safeguards that people might have thought were there before and very much a sort of a medical sets of checks. Do you want to explain what has now been removed and how the law has been significantly changed? Rachel.
So the key safeguards are particularly retaining the age that one can change one's gender at 18. So that's been brought down to 16. And the other key safeguards would have been, of course, the period of time living in one's acquired gender. That's now gone down from 2 years to 3 months. And of course, the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, which can, in some circumstances, be important to people because there are undiagnosed conditions that diagnosis can find and help and support people. But I just want to make it clear, Esther, that we do want to improve the experience for trans people. That's really important because they are a stigmatized part of the community. But in my view, it would have been better to have looked at the healthcare provision and the pathway to healthcare for trans people, rather than to remove these key safeguards, which in a way actually removes the protections for vulnerable people.
Peter, I just wanted to ask you about the point that Rachel made about the age being reduced to 16. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, it seems that in many respects, Parliament's going in the opposite direction. They're saying that, you've got to be 18 now before you can consider mature enough to decide whether to smoke or not. They sort of keep raising the age at which you are able to do things. But here,
drive, to get a bank loan.
Yes, exactly. Whereas here, you can at 16, you can make a legally binding declaration that they're living in an acquired gender and intend to do so forever. Is that not a concern that this is too young for people to be asked to do that?
Well, of course, if someone wants a gender recognition certificate at the age of 16, they have to be living their affirmed gender identity for a period not of 3 months, but of 6 months. And even then, there's a cooling off period. Lots of things that people do are allowed from the age of 16 onwards. There's a very big move to reduce the voting age to 16. There are, lots of things that 16-year-olds can do.
I want to thank
they are regarded
Peter
as being mature enough to make a whole host of modern, important decisions. This is just another one.
OK. Well, just another one. It's a big one.
I just want to ask Rachel very quickly, Rachel.
Yeah,
do you want the government, the UK government, to block this legislation or not?
Well, it is absolutely right that the UK government look at this legislation as they do with all other legislations that are passed in a devolved administration. But the particular issue here is that we need to look at the legal impact and the impact that it will have on the protections and rights of women and girls. So that's a really important matter that the UK government should look at.
Rachel and Peter Tatchell. Rachel Hamilton, thank you very much indeed. We kept that on a very calm, even, well-led debate there. Now, we're going to be talking about it with Tessa and Simon in a few minutes. But coming up, teachers are washing clothes and feeding their pupils. Surely that's unacceptable, but is it happening? We'll be discussing that with a head teacher from one of the poorest areas in Bradford. But before that, and before we hear from Tessa and Simon, before that, here's the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Good morning, it's 11:33, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Nurses in England will go on strike again on the 18th and 19th of January. The Royal College of Nursing says the walkout will go ahead unless the government opens up negotiations over pay. Meanwhile, the GMB unions called off a post-Christmas strike by ambulance workers. Members of the union in England and Wales were due to walk out on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and staffing. The Prime Minister's apologised for Christmas travel delays as strike action by Border Force staff disrupts the plans of those hoping to travel by air today. Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports will all be affected. However, Heathrow does say it's operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. Rishi Sunak says public sector pay must be controlled to keep down inflation.
First of all, I'm really sad and I'm disappointed about the disruption that is being caused to so many people's lives, particularly at Christmas time. What I'm trying to do is make the right long-term decisions for the country, for everybody's benefit. And I think we all know that the major economic challenge we all face now is inflation. It's inflation that's eating into everyone's pay packets, it's rising the cost of living, and I want to make sure that we reduce inflation. Part of that is being responsible when it comes to setting public sector pay.
The Prime Minister says it's completely reasonable to consider blocking new gender legislation in Scotland. MSPs voted to pass the bill yesterday. It'll remove the need for a medical diagnosis to obtain a gender recognition certificate. Holyrood has warned any attempted intervention from the UK government will be vigorously contested. George Cohen, part of England's 1966 World Cup winning team, has died aged 83. Cohen played every minute of the victorious campaign on home soil and in total won 37 caps for his country. His former club Fulham announced his death this morning. And some breaking news just in. Several people are reported to be wounded after gunshots were fired in a central district of Paris. Police have arrested the suspected gunman, according to French TV channel BFM TV. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Esther and Philip will be back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB Plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, it's 11:39. Now, a new survey by Education...
hang on a sec. We were going to go back to
we
Tessa and
we?
Simon, because obviously big new piece of legislation came into...
I apologise, you're right. You're always right.
Oh, you don't need to apologise and then go over the top and say that. So basically, this Gender Recognition Act has really caused, uproar for different reasons. And Tessa, your reason is slightly different.
Well, I have a bit of an issue sitting next to Phil, who is an English Conservative MP, saying, oh, well, rights, most of the time we have to nowadays be 18 to smoke, 18 to do this. That is not a man who was born and brought up in Scotland. I can tell you, as a child, I knew that I was allowed to get married in Scotland without my parents' consent from the age of 16, unlike my Sassenachs cousins south of the border. And also in Scotland, of course, you can vote from the age of 16. So you're telling me, if you want to be legally consistent, I can get married in Scotland, I can vote in Scotland, but I can't decide about my own gender.
But you can't smoke. You're not mature enough to make that decision.
I don't want to encourage
you. Probably can't get a mortgage. You probably can't do any financial stuff.
Mature enough to make that decision. That's the whole point of the age. You're not considered mature enough to make the decision.
But I'm allowed to vote. I'm allowed to vote and I'm allowed to marry, which means I must be aware of which gender I am if I'm allowed to marry and of all the area of sexual orientation.
Don't you think? Because I believe in choice, but I think this transitioning is a big decision. A long time ago, early 90s, I did a documentary on transgender and people changing and just saying, could they live as a man or a woman? Could they live differently? How did they do it? What medical support did they need? What was it going to be like?
I hear that. I hear your concerns, but this is a matter for Scotland. And if your government, your Conservative and Unionist government, take this up and choose to fight the Scottish government on its red rag to a bull for independence, it's going to be careering down the fast lane.
So yours isn't about the needs of those people transgender.
It's about both.
The union side.
I don't agree with Tessa on this, but the Scottish government have described this as a historical occasion. In British history, I think this will be seen as a very dark day. The legislation's been rushed through. It hasn't been thought through. I think they'll come to regret it, and I think it's right and proper that the British Parliament scrutinise that legislation and make it different, and that's the role of the UK Parliament. I think
for something that was meant to get rid of discrimination, it's caused a lot of sort of distress and
I think Labour's making a big mistake supporting it in Scotland. I think this will come back to bite them electorally as well.
Well, we want to hear your views as usual. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, as we were a few moments ago. A new survey by Education Support suggests that 2/5 of teachers are washing their pupils' clothes and providing them with food, possibly in response to the worsening cost of living crisis.
Here to tell us more is Adrian Nishaw, the head teacher of Carlton Academy Trust. So, Adrian, when I read this, I did think, really? Can that be true? Teachers washing their pupils' clothes? Why?
Well, I think the surveys, the research has overstated it a bit. They were saying that 3/4 of teachers are buying uniform, a quarter are buying food, and 1 in 8 are cleaning clothes. But that's not to diminish the problems, because I've noticed this year a discernible uptick in the level of deprivation and financial difficulties. I'll give you one example. One of our schools in the Trust, which is in a scheme with Bradford Council, and we open now on the late afternoon and early evening, so that local parents, local community members can go into the school, have a hot drink and keep warm, because they can't afford the heating bills at home and stuff to assist with that. Now, for me, that's shocking. It sounds like something that you'd imagine from the 1930s and the Great Depression, and something you never thought you'd hear about in Britain in the 2020s.
I mean, is this something new, Adrian, that teachers are claiming to have to step in to buy food, buy stationery, clothing? Has this always happened, or is this a new phenomenon?
Well, it's always happened to a far lesser degree than it is happening now. But we certainly hear him. I'm not aware of anyone in the trust particularly doing those things mentioned there in the research. We're hearing more of informally things such as the greater uptake for free school meals in the school, because lots of parents don't want to admit they're in financial difficulties, so they don't tend to. Some of them don't tend to claim for free school meals, but we're getting more of them now. We're forced into that, and the same thing with breakfast clubs in the morning. More and more students are attending those, so those are more informal measures, and we hear things informally from students. And when we hear those things, we do intervene and help out wherever we can. But I'm not aware of any of my staff in the trust washing clothes for staff or buying food as such, or buying clothes and things. I'm not to that extent, but certainly things are far more difficult this year than they've ever been in the past.
Yeah, and I understand as you say, the school lunches, and I understand the breakfast clubs and the other sort of support you're giving there. But I felt that was crossing a line in a way, washing clothes, because I would have thought that is a parent's responsibility. And, I would have thought that really is important that a parent does. And I don't believe that you can't afford a bar of soap.
No, but one of the issues we're getting informally is about there's two real elements here which is causing problems for parents, and one is the energy costs, the electric costs, which is a real issue. And one story I got coming back through one of the heads of schools at one of the local schools was where one parent who had got two children went for a shower for 10 minutes, and within that 10 minutes they'd used a £10 credit on the electric, so it gets punitively expensive for them to use the electric in the home. And the other thing is food as well. And, we've got a 10% headline rate of inflation currently. I think we can all recognise that food, like the electric and energy generally, is far above that. And so it's having a disproportionate effect upon the families. So, yes, we're not washing the clothes from there, but I can understand why they might wash them, with greater, less frequency because of the cost of the electric and the energy.
Adrian, I'm just very quickly, are you finding more parents saying they can't afford to buy school uniform and things like that? Is that more prevalent now?
We're getting an uptick in that, definitely. And what we do there, if there are any issues with that one there, there'll be a pupil premium student, classed as a disadvantaged student, and we would help out in the school with the monies we're given by the government to cater for that, and we'd help out buying uniform for them. Also, as well, there's a legislation now. All schools have got to offer second-hand uniform to students who have having difficulty as well. So we offer that as well through all the schools. So we would have no student, if we thought there was a problem with uniform, we would intervene and make sure that we could provide them with the uniform and fully integrate and take part in the full education as part of the schools.
Adrian Neeshaw from the Carlton Academy Trust, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a really distressing story on many levels, and I guess now this dependency that we all have, it's got to be in a washing machine and it's got to be, electric sort of use there, whereas I guess I am of the age where people would have used the sink and we would have got a bar of soap and water out and done it that way. People just don't think that way anymore.
No, and I think, but it also points towards a level of domestic chaos, of domestic breakdown. When you've got huge financial pressure on your family group, things slip, standards slip. That's inevitable, isn't it?
Well, thank you. We need to move on, but thank you for that, Tessa. The owner of a bakery in Blackpool became the centre of a social media storm this week when his non-binary gingerbread people caused a stir with some shoppers who labelled them as ridiculous and outrageous.
Paul Cook, appropriately named, the man who owns the cottage bakery, said the tasty treats were never intended to upset anybody or be offensive. And we're delighted to say that Paul joins us now. So what's it like to be in the eye of a Twitter storm? What's been going on?
Oh, it's ridiculous. We just can't believe what's going on. We never expected anything like this to happen. It's just gone from...
So how come...
It's crazy.
How come, Paul, you were baking these non-binary gingerbread people out? How did that come about in the first place?
It was just because we had to relabel them because... the laws for the labelling came about, and we had a lot of people going on that we couldn't call them gingerbread men. So I was changing it to gingerbread person, and the conversation came about that, why don't you just put non-binary on for a laugh, which was like 3-4 years ago. So we did it, and nothing's ever come about it till somebody posted it on a Facebook page.
Yeah, so it was a joke You were only doing it as a joke because, to be fair, the gingerbread, you wouldn't know what they were anyway, would you really? Let's be honest. I know we call them gingerbread men. You did it as a joke and as a backlash because you called it non-binary. People went mad. What were the sort of comments you were getting? What happened?
There's been a lot of comments on Facebook, negative and positive. People coming in the shop now hasn't really made any changes at all. If people have asked for non-binary, just like having a bit of a laugh about it, really. It's not been offensive in the shops, thank God. We had a few dodgy phone calls, but apart from that, it's been okay. It's just a lot of hate on Facebook sometimes.
Have sales gone up? That's what I want to say.
Oh, there you go. No. Simon thinking about his bank balance. Have the sales gone up?
Yeah, the sales have gone up.
See, all publicity is good publicity, isn't it, Paul? So have you got plans for any more of these joke products then, Paul? If the sales have gone up, are you thinking about branching out into other more politically correct products?
I'm not too sure at the moment. This took us a bit back, this. We never expected anything like this to happen. So we'd rather be a bit politically correct, to be honest. It took us a bit by storm.
Paul Cook, thank you very much indeed for joining us, because we just saw in the eye of the storm. What is it like when there you are, baker, not expecting it, and then obviously you do this. But it was a bit of a...
I wonder if a non-binary gingerbread person tastes better than a gingerbread man.
I wonder if nowadays, given the new legislation, it wouldn't sell better in Scotland. But, you know, what's interesting is that the huge PR coup this year was Celebration saying, we're going to get rid of Bounty. Of course, they were never going to, but it made us all talk about celebrations.
We're all too cynical.
I think
we're all too cynical.
He could give them a run for his money.
Totally, they could. Now, let's get you up to date with the latest news from the world of sport and showbiz. This is what we're all looking forward to. We're now pleased to say we're joined by Courtney Sweetman-Kirk, forward for Sheffield United, and our showbiz reporter, Sarah Robertson. So we've got to go to Courtney straight away, obviously, after that wonderful Sports Personality of the Year going to Beth Mead. You must have been delighted.
Yeah, definitely. She's, had such a fantastic year for the Lionesses. Even before that, a season for Arsenal, she was in fantastic form. So, she's been performing on the football pitch and off the football pitch, picking up accolades as well.
Courtney, what has the Lionesses' success done for women's football? I mean, are there now sort of much bigger crowds? Do you get more interest from people than you did before? I mean, has it really made a marked difference in interest in women's football?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the big change for me is the fact that it's the longevity of it and sustainability. I think previously we've always seen after major tournaments that, the first couple of games back domestically, we do see an increase in attendances and, interest in the game. But, then a few weeks later, it starts to fall off where, for me now, it's fantastic. We're still in December. We're still getting record crowds, being spoke about in different ways and different news outlets. And then obviously the recognition for, even a female footballer to be included in the running for Sports Personality of the Year, let alone to go and win it. So it's definitely, captured the nation's sort of thoughts for sure. And hopefully long may it continue. And now we've got a World Cup to look forward to next year as well.
Absolutely. Just back to the men's game for a second. I watched last night a fantastic game between Liverpool and Manchester City in the Carabao Cup. And I was reflecting on, actually, I thought, blimey, I reckon these games, the Premier League teams, they're better than the World Cup teams, to be perfectly honest. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting game, and I think we've seen it, whether it be when the Championship resumed a little bit earlier in December or the Cup games recently. I think because there's been that break, it has been, slightly different. It's something that, male footballers have never had to think about in terms of a break mid-season. So I do think it's levelled the playing field a little bit in terms of it's almost you're having to go for a mini pre-season again. And I think it's made for some really exciting games in the Cup, and hopefully we see that with the resumption of the Premier League as well.
Well, I'm just glad that you're showing the men how to do it and how to bring the silverware back to the country. That's all I can say. Now, Sarah, showbiz. Hello. Tell us your latest showbiz news. You've always got the scoops.
I have got the scoops. So first up, if we've got our lovely Princess of Wales. Tomorrow night on ITV is the Carol concert, which she held last week. We get to watch that tomorrow in Kensington Palace have released some new details of what we can expect. It's going to be an absolutely beautiful service from the Princess of Wales, dedicated to Our Late Majesty the Queen, because obviously Christmas was very, very important to the Queen for this period, and the festive period. And it's about coming together, and, you know, Kate sort of really is trying to address the nation and say how important it is that everybody's remembered at Christmas, and about loyalty and duty and all those important qualities, but really about being together and those who have lost people at Christmas. And obviously we have lost the Queen. So that's going to be really beautiful. There's some performances from Mel C, Alfie Boe, Hugh Bonneville gives a recital, and we also hear, which is very special, the Princess of Wales has invited St Mary's Ukrainian School to come and perform a carol. So that's very special. So she's been doing some work with them behind the scenes, and we're going to hear from the children of Mary's Ukrainian School, which is really beautiful. So that's going to be very interesting.
Sarah, I just wondered if Kate being sort of thrust into the spotlight on Christmas Eve, is this in retaliation for Meghan? Is this part of the competition between Catherine and Meghan?
Well, it's the second time that she's held. The Princess of Wales has held this carol service. This is the second time she's done this. So she's really coming into her own now, and it's becoming something that's associated with Kate Middleton, with the Princess of Wales, and it's really lovely to see. So yes, when they recorded it, let's not forget, it was straight in the aftermath of the Harry and Meghan Netflix bombshell documentary, and all of the royal family, well, the females of the royal family wore berry, which some people have tried to say was them blowing a bit of a raspberry at Meghan and Harry, because they all decided to wear this raspberry shade of clothing. So there you go. So
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Just very quickly, Courtney, if you had to choose your football team, would you have Harry or William, or would you have Meghan or Kate? Who would you have in your team?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think the boys are rugby players, aren't they? So I'm going to have to go with the girls, so they'll probably be better off.
Thank you both very much indeed for joining us for a bit of showbiz and a bit of sport there. So we've come to the end of the show. I tell you, it's been a feisty one, it's been a fast one, it's been a cramped one. Thank you very much indeed, and you've spilt all the family secrets.
Yes, indeed, you have.
And I'm going to go home now and probably discover my daughter wants to go to Scotland to get married age 16. The cat's out of the bag.
And I'm going to get in trouble with my teenage sons for buying them luggage for Christmas.
Yeah.
We'll have to go.
Here's your hat, watch your hurry, here's the message. Well, look, it's been a fantastic show. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, but we're going to leave you next in the safe and capable hands of Andrew Pearce.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at